First of all, I wanted to thank everybody for almost 1,000 subscribers. I'm sure that if I do end up making this into a YouTube video, it'll probably be 1,000 subscribers by then. I do still have plans on making the commonly accepted timeline of the Five Nights at Freddy's series. I plan on making that. I plan on also making the Silver Eyes Bing canon, which will be one of my best videos, I'm hoping. I'm really excited for that one. Currently, I have a poll over on YouTube in my community determining whether or not what I'm gonna do for my 1,000 subscriber special, you know? Right now, what's winning is a Q&A stream, which will be on YouTube instead of Twitch, but we'll end up seeing how that goes. So, with that being said, let's get into watching this awesome video.
Really ask yourself, what or who is this thing?
I understand why this question is being raised. There's currently this question of what is the importance of Sun and Moon, because during the events of Security Breach, there happened to be plushies, there happened to be masks, there happens to be all kinds of things. They're all pointing towards Sun and Moon having some sort of really big job here. But nobody really knows what that is at the moment. So that's what the current theories are going around for and why everyone's so curious about it. Ooh, I just noticed that I might have to go check that out. Iron Mouse is streaming on the QSMP. I just wanted to let you guys know, I do plan on doing Heaven SMP stuff soon. Unfortunately, at the moment, everybody is busy. I do want to get it started again. I am currently brainstorming lore ideas and about how I want to go actually about the series. My question is, do I want to go more story-centric, or do I want to go more open-ended, open-world-centric with an underlying story overall? But I'll end up asking you guys that question so that way I can determine what people actually want to see when it comes to an SMP storyline. Because originally, both series, the Echo SMP and the Heaven SMP, both of which were very heavily story-driven, which means that a lot of the people that were part of those SMPs didn't feel very comfortable with trying to fit the part that I was writing as the narrative of the story. And so I just want to give the puzzle pieces. I want to release one video that will essentially set up all the puzzle pieces for what's going on, and then letting everyone go loose and see what happens. Or at least that's what I'm currently working on. If you guys want to actually see an actual narrative, let me know. But I feel like that's probably going to be the most comfortable for everybody to make their own storylines, start their own wars, have everything go interestingly enough. I already have the world built. I already have an idea of what Purgatory is really going to be about. I'm going to have to go rename that other video because I do not want that to be Heaven Season 2. I want that to be sort of an introduction to the world, and I want to try and somehow explain that. So we're going to be getting into all of that some other time. That's not a today thing, or we'll talk about it after this video. We'll see. But let's continue watching this video.
One already full of a core band of animatronics with old and new faces.
It's arguable, Matthew, because technically there was also an alligator in Happiest Day, and we've had a wolf inside of the Silver Eyes trilogy, so...
Well, give him a nice close-up look. And now, watch the clip of the mimic from the end of the game. You see anything interesting?
Their endos are very similar. They have the same teeth. This brings me up with another point I wanted to point out. I noticed that in the original trailer for Security Breach, there is specifically an orange tint to all of the eyeballs of the Glam Rock animatronics. They all have an orange tint to their eyes when it goes into the black area, which implies that all of the characters at some point were controlled by the mimic, or that they have a mimic endo, one of the two. And then leading into Freddy, because I don't think Freddy ever has that reappear, excluding that one scene inside of the trailer showing them all with an orange pupil in the very not pupil, just a glowing light coming from their eyes when they're inside of the elevator. But this is very interesting because it would then imply that Sun and Moon was created around the same time as the Mimic. I want to see where he's going with this. See, because we don't actually know when the Mimic was actually sealed up. We don't know if it was post FNAF 6 that it was sealed up. We don't know if it was before the events of FNAF 6, or if it was much later by Cassie's dad, which is the current running theory. One of the two current running theories is that Cassie's dad was the original person that locked it up. It then somehow managed to convince Gregory or Vanessa to go back down into the basement, and they had to reseal it. But it's still up for debate about who created MXES, and when was the Mimic originally locked up?
He has truly seen everything.
Is this MatPat saying that that Eclipse is Chica? Is that what you're trying to get at? I don't know how I feel about that one, but sure.
My theory is the valid theory. MatPat can suck an egg.
I'm still upset that all of them chose to ignore me inside of that voice call and steal my work, every single one of them. And they even cut out the fact that ID and Rytos were also in there. I physically couldn't talk to them. Let me tell you, it was one of the most upsetting nights.
And everyone celebrated the victory by eating oddly symbolic ice creams on a hill. That also meant that this...
I will say that it is pretty damning evidence for all the people that think that Gregory and the crying child aren't connected. And given what John has been saying, I'm leaning more and more towards children being robots, but we're not going to go over that. It's basically based on one small comment that I asked Heidi about, and she couldn't really come up with an answer. Why does Gregory actually get possessed or controlled by the Mimic or Afton, whichever one you want to believe? If Tails game, we're not getting into that debate, but ignoring that, how does Gregory actually get controlled by whatever's controlling him? Because we don't really see any evidence that he used the Vanny mask. And then we have the problem of he also doesn't... How would some random kid that seems to be homeless get access to the beta version of Help Wanted VR? Because I don't know if it was ever made into a public game, because I feel like we would be worrying about a lot more if the game became public. So I'm going to assume that it's still in beta. He wouldn't be able to access it just like Vanny or Jeremy had. So then what really... How did it gain control over Gregory? I like the answer. I still am a bit questionable about whether or not both Freddys are the same character, but I do like the idea of Cassie was then connected to the Vanny system, whether she was wearing the mask or not. The mask only showed things that the technicians would be needing to see while wearing the mask. But it also warped her normal reality as well. So that implies that there are pieces of normal reality that also don't exist but seem like they exist, which might explain where the prototype actually comes from. But then you have to ask the question, because inside of the trailer, I'm pretty sure he did not have the prototype written on his foot inside of the trailer. And a lot of people tried to sum it up to, oh, it was painted over. But I do like the idea that it was potentially just the fact that technicians are the only ones that would need to know this information. But then it brings me back to the whole argument about Freddy having his whole midlife crisis about not being the first Freddy. It's a whole confusing thing. That's why I've only covered it in that video, and I've never gone like fully in depth with it, because there's just so many arguments you can have there about him being the same Freddy and there being multiple Freddys.
Hid the one and only Circus Baby's Pizza World. This revelation was huge. Not only did it suggest...
Not Circus Baby's Pizza World. It houses Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals. It does not have Circus Baby's Pizza World. Circus Baby's Pizza World was a physical above-ground location. I also like that idea from John. John didn't get that idea. I believe he got it from another person. And I'd heard it questioned before, but I was like, no, they're two separate elevators. But then it becomes the same question of Vanny mask warping reality while not wearing the Vanny mask. Could that elevator be the actual sister location elevator? It's a good question. I wouldn't really call that second one a vent. That's more a sewer tunnel, but sure.
We get a ton of information about Cassie's father, that her dad used to collect old Freddy and Friends lunch.
If I remember correctly, this is most likely going to be going over what he mentioned inside of GT Live, because that seems to be what the points he's bringing up is, which means he might be bringing up the idea that the games are just games, which is a really good theory. And the more I look at VR, the more it does seem like that, because people are under the assumption of, well, the reason that we know what the sister location events were and everything of that sort, it's because of Michael's logbook and all of the other circuit boards. But they use screenshots straight out of sister location, straight out of FNAF 4, 2 times. Those seem like extremely difficult things to get from the perspective of Fazbear Entertainment if they did not physically have these games in existence. There should be no reason that they should have a picture of someone messing around with the Funtime Freddy. There's no reason that they should have a plush trap minigame picture, only for then at PAX, their little stand for Help Wanted 2 distinctly has that same exact minigame. And the fact that Help Wanted 2 starts with showing the sister location bunker. All of that is pointing towards the fact that those games were most likely games inside of in-universe, so I don't really blame him for thinking that maybe Edwin is a Henry parallel instead of the other way around. Or Henry is an Edwin parallel instead of the other way around. Sorry. let's just continue. I saw people on Twitter trying to mock him for that. People on Twitter mock MatPat for literally just breathing. So, like, dude, come on.
And notice how every line describing him is written in the past tense, implicitly telling us that her dad is no longer around. There is a lot in here.
So this is a continuation of my theories about how we're probably going to play as Cassie's dad. It's not my theory. I did steal it from somebody else, but I do believe that that is most likely what's going to happen. We distinctly get mention of her dad, who is a technician in the past tense, and then we have a game where the first scene we see is a character that's in the position of a technician being hired with the same technology that the Faz wrench is used for in a game from a very long time ago. I don't think it's too far-fetched to believe that her dad is going to be who we play as during the events of Help Wanted 2, but we'll end up seeing. Because it can't be Vanessa. It wouldn't make sense for Vanessa to get possessed during the events of Help Wanted 1 and then come back to Fazbear Entertainment and be like, guys, first time didn't work out, let me play the second game again, you know? It just doesn't make sense. We have to have another important character go on to play that, because if we had the first person be Vanessa, who went on to be the main antagonist, or was supposed to be the main antagonist of Security Breach, then that implies that whoever we play as in Help Wanted 2 should also be a significant character. And it should mention two significant characters, that being whoever the protagonist and whoever the secret antagonist of that is, who I'm pretty sure most of us have realized at this point will most likely be the Mimic in some form. It could be Glitchtrap, but I don't think... Well, of course, there are people that believe they're both the same entity, but still, I think that the Mimic will most likely end up being the villain of that game. And then, whether it be DLC or a completely new game, I do think Gregory might at some point go back down there, because I do think he's going to be playing the role of like a John Carlton-ish role of trying to save Cassie. Or it could go, a lot of people want Cassie to end up being the new villain, but we'll see.
That's right. Way back in Sister Location, we got to see actual humans in this series, only for them to quickly get...
These three characters have been brought up a lot because they were some of the most forgotten characters. I think it's the one biggest piece that sort of suggested Molten MCI was not the truth, because Molten MCI was built on the idea that there was only one or two MCIs, and that was the only murders that happened, and maybe also the marionette. That was usually the belief system, but Sister Location distinctly shows us that no, there have been multiple more murders that weren't caused directly by William, but were caused indirectly by William. I do feel like at some point they'll end up being important characters, and we distinctly see two technicians that are murdered. Most likely the same exact technicians that we see save Michael during the events of Night 4, because they never went home that night or whatever. And then we also hear that there was a body found inside of the vent, which a lot of people are wondering, is that Rory, or who was it that died inside of that vent? Who knows?
Heck, we even got to hear these guys.
Just seems like these things keep...
And this is my biggest evidence towards William most likely being alive during the events of Sister Location. Why Henry would most certainly not continue using this company. I know I used that as an excuse during my last video about how, well, Funtime Chica sure does still seem to be sold, but I don't believe Henry would be running Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals. That's just not him, and we are distinctly told that these animatronics are Afton Robotic property. It is most likely a subdivision of Fazbear Entertainment, but these have Afton's name written all over it. So that means if there's still technicians going down there, especially Michael, it most likely means that before the events of Sister Location or during the events of Sister Location, William was alive.
and operational. Notice the lack of yellow danger tape found at the bottom of the elevator.
I have heard that brought up multiple times too. This implies that this event takes place before Sister Location, which is really interesting.
But I suspect that he and Cassie might wind up united down there in the bunker at the end of all of this.
Yeah, and a lot of people are wondering, VR was originally about Glitchtrap and Vanny switching places. A lot of people are wondering, is this going to be a similar situation with her father where he is trapped inside of the VR experience that was created for the specific purpose of technicians being trained to be part of the Fazbear company, and potentially even for Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals, and that he might be stuck inside of the experience, which means he could still be alive, which, you know, isn't that surprising given the multitude of people that have always come back inside of this series. I definitely still think that at some point we'll see Gregory down there, but I don't know. There's just so many options that you could go with this new game.
Which reads, what happened to you? You might interpret that to be what happened to you, Glamrock Bonnie.
It is also an interesting thing that the two characters that show up as masks are Foxy and Bonnie. Two masks that we see show up inside of Help Wanted and are very heavily implied to be the same exact masks that were worn during the Bite of 83. So a lot of people think that potentially the character who wore the Bonnie mask and happens to share the same color palette might be her father, but a lot of people have brought up the argument of, well, then he would have been 40 when he had her. It's an iffy thing. Some people still think that maybe Cassie might be a robot. I don't know. I just know that there are a lot of connections between multiple characters within inside of this series. That is what I know.
But secondly, and more importantly, Cassie actually knows the truth about what happened to Glamrock Bonnie. She knows that it was Monty Gator who eliminated him from the picture. In a later item description, this time for the AR Glam Monty plush, the description reads, it's hard to look at. Why? Why would the only Monty item that Cassie can collect in the entire game be so hard to look at? Well, it's because she knows what he did. She knows that Monty's guilty, violent, responsible for trashing Glamrock Bonnie, and as
Matthew, I think you might be looking a little too much into that part, okay? I don't think she's gonna have emotional reactions towards Bonnie. She seemed very obsessed with Roxy, so it's understandable. But I don't know about so much about Bonnie, unless it's like a connection that, or she does seem to share the same colors. Maybe her fucking father is Bonnie. I don't know. Let's just keep going.
But that then leads us to another question. Why is she reminded of him with that particular item? The Bonnie...
I mean, technically, one of the endings of Help Wanted is Vanessa being put inside of the Freddy animatronic. Would it really be too far-fetched to believe that her father was put inside of Bonnie? Especially since Bonnie is still alive. We know that. You physically kill him by activating all of the signs. I wonder.
Was that the Bite of 87?
No, Mark, no, it wasn't.
Poor Mark. He'll never live this scene down. Every single time it's used, everyone will say, no, you are wrong, Mark. This is not the Bite of 87.
Theories are the only valid theories. You go lick a stick. I'm saying that Cassie's dad...
I know he told you to suck an egg, but I don't know if that's the proper reaction you should be having, Matthew. Anyway, continue.
Why would Steel Wool include such a random and, more importantly, incomplete...
Wait, is he trying to tie her father into Eclipse? I don't know so much about that one. I don't know the relationship between Michael's friends and the animatronics, because you could interpret it as they did like the animatronics, or you could interpret it as they didn't like the animatronics. I don't really know, because Michael most certainly didn't seem too interested in the animatronics. He just seemed kind of interested in tormenting his brother. Then again, Freddy Masked Green Guy did distinctly say that nobody else was scared, so I don't know how they feel about the characters. Okay, I'm happy he did not try to tie the father with Eclipse, because there were I don't see any connections between those two. I do want to make a note of, if FNAF 1 through 7 seems to be the story of Afton and his influence on Fazbear Entertainment, and that those games are potentially all video games within the real Five Nights at Freddy's universe, starting through the events of AR, VR, and Security Breach, and that this is a completely separate world. They both exist within the same continuity, except one is a video game, one is not. It makes you wonder, why would the video games intentionally paint Afton as, like, the major guy? Well, I guess it's the fact that, you know, he's a serial killer and probably the most infamous surrounded around the company. So it would make sense for most of the games to be surrounded about him, especially if they're trying to be creepy. But that does open the door for completely every other character throughout the entire series that's ever been mentioned to somehow make a reappearance or have some sort of importance. Oh, I see where he's going with this. This is back on the circus theory. That there was a circus a long time ago that was originally planned, and that Fredbear's singing show was, it was derived from this original circus. Which is an interesting thought, because does that mean he's going to try and tie it in with the circus suits under the Pizza Plex? That would actually match. That would match, depending on how old the Mimic is. It makes you wonder, no, the Mimic is a very high piece of technology, I'm gonna say that. Is that something that someone could physically make during the 70s or before? I don't think so, but I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt here. We have distinct cardboard cutouts of Fredbear. We have posters. We have the ticket for all of these things that physically shouldn't exist anymore. Where did they all come from? Because by all means, unless we're assuming that all of this was just left inside of the Circus Baby's Pizza World bunker, which is weird, a weird assumption. I'm assuming at some point Fredbear's has to close. And the Fredbear suit and Spring Bonnie suit, one of the two, most likely ended up getting sent over to, we know both of them end up at the Freddy's locations and are no longer at the Fredbear's locations at some point during the time. Were the Fredbear props being kept in the circus location? Or were they being kept at some alternative location? Because I know that they mentioned how the spring locks were sent to an alternative location. Which is weird, because they distinctly mention how the spring locks were sent to an alternative location, and yet we see multiple times over and over again that the spring locks were in fact not sent to an alternative location. They were just kind of moved between Freddy's locations. Which means Fungi's just a fucking liar. Or at least whoever was telling him to say those things is a fucking liar. Those Springlock suits were still being used far after the point which they were not supposed to be being used anymore.
I do suspect that these masks were actually...
I don't know, Matthew. I don't know. All I'm saying is that you said that the Fazbear singing show takes place in the 1920s. I would not put it past you to say that these were as old as fucking Greek masks. But let's continue. I also don't know why Steelwool would use this game's items as a representation of when animatronics existed. I think they have different meanings. I don't think that it's associated with which animatronics came out first, but more, why would this character need to be added as a collectible character? What is their significance being here? Like the masks, that implies that something involving the masks, this story has something involving the masks. That's the reason why they're here. They don't match the security breach area whatsoever, so they have to exist for a purpose. Which is, it just feels weird to be trying to use a lack of other characters to assume that that's like a progression system.
Anyway, we know thanks to the Tales from the Pizza Plex that a jester costume was present all the way back when the original Mimic was made. Quote,
He had to use quotes this time, because a lot of people took his words out of context within his last theory. I understand that MatPat's videos are chronological. If you don't watch the video before, you're not going to actually understand what's going on in the video currently. So that means if he makes a theory within his last video, unless the next video distinctly calls out this theory for being incorrect, I'm going to assume that it's still building off of the same building blocks. because he mentions when he's changed his mind inside of videos. So I think that's where that biggest caveat came from, which a lot of people brought up against Matt. I don't think Matt was just, it's not a situation of Matt just flat out using misinformation. It's a situation of Matt had a video before, and it's expected that you watch the video before when watching this video, because he has a narrative he's trying to tell, and you have to actually understand where his mind space came from going into the next video, which is why that little tidbit about how the books distinctly show Charlie doing so and so within Tales. It was a reference to his previous video, not an actual just pulling shit out of thin air. It was just something from his previous theory. That's why he continued it. That's always been how Matthew has sort of operated. He's probably going to learn from that situation that maybe he should be a little bit more safe when he does this stuff.
He could then give them stomach hatches and other features to help him capture kids, all to forward his experiments in bringing...
Okay, but then ask the question, what was the whole point of the scooper then? The whole purpose of the scooper was to transfer Remnant, and if the fun times aren't transferring Remnant based on the fact that they're getting scooped by the scooper, that would kind of make the scooper obsolete if we were to assume that they were just mimic programs. It would make some things interesting, because I do think that the fun times mimic the Afton family. Not like mimic the Afton family, but they're very heavily inspired by the Afton family, I believe. But I also think there's a lot of problems that would come from something like that, because, yeah, the scooper would become completely irrelevant if we were to assume that it was just a mimicking software, and that the only purpose for this scooper was just, oh, it was a plot device to kill Michael.
That then gives us two separate mimics, one inside Baby and the Fun Times, ready to be collected by...
Oh, this is a connection to his AI theory, isn't it? About how there's a William AI and there's a Charlie AI, and it's oh boy.
It's possible, it's confusing, and I suspect it might just be right. Guess all in a day's...
I think Matt is slowly falling into the Tales games canon area. I think that's what this is sort of implying. Because while he is definitely a parallel man, this seems to be the running theory for a lot of people in the Tales games community, is that there are just two separate mimics, and that there's one with inside of the code, and that this is the physical mimic, and that they're two separate things. It's funny how they both came to those conclusions. I'm a bit iffy on it. I'd have to read the Tales books myself, understand the mimic and how it works, in order to make any assumptions about them. But that's basically going to be it, guys. I unfortunately have other responsibilities I have to do, but I'll end up coming back tomorrow and probably talk more about Five Nights at Freddy's at some point. Thank you for coming to stream, though. I really appreciate it, and thank you for giving your feedback, and it's been an awesome time. If you want to, you can join the Discord, my Discord, which should be available through my card, in which I have people that also believe in Tales games, and you guys can present your evidence and things of that sort, and we can start discussing things like that in there, because I really just want to see everyone's perspective, so that we can try and see what points seem to be solid, what things are just speculation, and try and come to a consensus on everything. Because a lot of the time when you're scrolling through Twitter and stuff, all you see over and over again is headcanon, based on speculation. And it gets really annoying to the point where it feels difficult to be a theorist when so much misinformation is being spread around as if it were fact. But I think that's going to be stream. I'm going to see you guys later at some other time. Matane.